Today, I'm going to talk about how to make a tarp for your model car diorama. Welcome back to ScaleSpeedworks. My name's Mike. So I made this tarp the other day, and I thought it turned out pretty well. And I'd just like to share my experience making this so you guys can make your own. Now, let me get this set and let me get this clear right off the bat. I am in no way an expert at making these. I just thought my method turned out pretty good, and I'd like to share it with you guys. So, let's set this aside, and I'll tell you what you're going to need. First things first, if I were you, I would get some wax paper, or in this case, parchment paper, because we're all out of wax paper, to cover your work area. Next, now this is optional, but highly recommended, cooking spray. Don't worry. You'll see why in just a minute. You're going to need some paint. I like this acrylic paint. It's cheap. It's easy to find. It comes in a multitude of colors, so you can easily find what you need. We need a mixing bowl. We need some good old school glue. We're going to need a brush or two. I've never tried this, but I think this might work, and I might try it out today. We'll see. We're going to be using glue. I'd recommend getting an old brush. And finally, we're going to need some good plain old tissue. Okay. This stuff just happens to be a good quality name brand tissue, but you could use a good quality store brand tissue as well. I would just recommend avoiding the cheap stuff. Now, this thing is huge. In order to cut that, just a regular old pair of scissors. So, let me get stuff set, and I'll be right back. All right, I got my tissue cut in half here. The other thing that we're going to need is some thinner. I mixed this up based upon a recipe that Dan the Man over at 60s Rule Channel laid out in one of his videos. I'm going to link that video in the description so you guys can go over and make your own thinner. He uses this for the airbrush, and that's great. I'm going to use it here because I think it's going to be good to use for this scenario. You could also use water, tap water, distilled water. I like to use this stuff. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Let's start out. We're going to do equal parts glue and paint. We're going to mix in some of this. So I like to use about 30% paint, 30% glue, and about 40% thinner. So you want this thin enough to brush on, but a little bit thicker than you'd want in your airbrush. Use this old brush, stir it up. Mixed up nice and good. I like that. We're going to set that aside for just a second here while I get my project. All right, so this is what I want to cover in a tarp, just like the other pickup truck bed. Just like this. Okay. Now this one has been weathered a little bit, and we're not going to do that today, but we're going to start out with that. Since I have glue in here, as soon as I put it on this tissue, that glue, it's going to soak in, it's going to soak through, it's going to glue itself to here. So that is where this stuff comes in. I'm going to take this off camera and spray this, and we'll be right back. Make sure you do have permission from the person in your household in charge of cooking before you use the cooking spray. Okay, so we have this. It's nice and thick. It's just a tad thinner than the paint that comes in the bottle. You see that's nice and glossy. What I did is I sprayed it on here and I cleaned it up with a little bit of a paper towel. Now the reason I did that is because I don't want that sticking to this, because this It's not painted. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to brush this on nice and thick. Now, the last time I did this, I did it with a really thinned out paint. And it worked okay. But I did have to come back and paint it again. So that was not ideal. So we're going to try it this way. You want your layers to stick together as much as possible, right? Let's make sure everything is nice and coated just the way you want. Looks pretty good from here. Now, this may not be the color you're after, but like I said, as long as you're using this acrylic craft paint, I don't think it matters too much. Okay, so let's get our tarp. You can check out the back side. Okay, it soaked through a little bit, not too much. Let's get this in the middle over here. What you can do, get it on there, get it adjusted the way that you want. You can also use your brush, kind of push it down. You might need another set of hands for this, but you can always push it down like so. And you could also come in later with a little bit of water. Now let's just use a little bit more of the paint and glue that we have. But you could come in with a little bit of water, do the same thing here, and get that to really contour nicely to your pickup truck bed. Okay? All right, so let's set this aside. I'm going to clean my brush so it doesn't dry up on me. And we're going to get to painting the other tarp. The truck bed. Let's see how this came out. Oh, that comes out no problem. That's great. And it did, yeah, that actually cleans up no problem. Let me get a rag. I like to use my old socks for rags. So that cleans up easily, real easily. A little soap and water on there. This part back here with cooking spray, no problem. No problem whatsoever. So once you get this painted and you get it weathered, I'd say that's a win. That fits in there. Contoured around here. Obviously, you would want to weather this up. I'm glad this dried up a darker color. So right now, I'm going to walk back everything I said about paint and glue and mixing it together. I'm going to scratch all that. Best thing for you to do is to get your tissue and just paint it with the glue. Absolutely the best way to go about this. Thin that glue just a little bit if you need to. You can either use tap water, distilled water, or thinner. And thin that enough, put it over the pieces that you want covered, and then get a brush and just get it wet. And keep working it until you're happy with it. Once you have that set up, I would take this and you could paint it any way you like. You could paint this with an airbrush and make camouflage. You could paint this with a regular brush and just use a little bit of thinned acrylic paint. You could use enamel paint. You could just use a Panaline accent color. You could use anything you want. I think this is the best way to go about it. Thin that glue just a touch if you need to, and just paint it onto your tissue. Paint it on, drape it over, wait for it to dry, call it a day. That's it. If you guys have any questions about the process or about anything that I do, go ahead, leave me a comment, hit me up, and I'll make sure I get back to you. All right, honestly, guys, that's all I got. So I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you on the next one.